All right. Are you someone that is wondering what to run post Starshatter Arsenal changes? Well, today you're in luck because I'm going to be going through a Warhammer 40K competitive list breakdown where I'm going to go through my methodologies, designing a list. So even if you're not a Necron player, I believe you're still going to get a lot of value out of this video today. And what you have in front of me is a list that I would potentially take to a GT or tournament coming up if I was going to be playing Starshatter Arsenal. So let's get into it, shall we? So as you know, if you've been here before, how I break up my lists. If you are a first-time visitor, appreciate you being here. But what simplifies my headspace when I'm designing a list, even if I'm a Necron player, if I'm not, is essentially into 3 different categories and what the game is designed around. I need to think about my home field and anchor section of my list. So basically what that means is what units are holding my home field objective, and then anchor means like what units do we have on our natural expansion. Okay, so what's going to be hopefully holding our primary every turn, scoring us points. All right, the next section is anti-tank. As it sounds, what do we have in the list that's going to be able to punch through that armor? So if we're going against like Imperial Knights, if we're going against Chaos Knights, if we're going against Custodes, these matchups where they have a lot of armor, they're very durable. How are we going to be able to punch through that if we get matched up with that in a tournament? And then the third section is mission play and primary denial. Okay, so this is a section that essentially, as it sounds, like who's scoring area denial, who's scoring containment, who's going through for area denial and behind enemy lines. How are you scoring those points and making sure you have enough units allocated for those actions? And then the second part of this is primary denial. And what is nice is these units a lot of times can be used interchangeably in 10th edition. So sometimes, you might have a unit that is doing containment one game, but in another game, they might have been able to harass your opponent's natural expansion. That's what we mean by primary denial. So what units are going after your opponent's strong side or the middle objective to either deny them primary or get you points. All right. So let's start at the top here. This is obviously a Silent King build. Okay. So we are still keeping the same home field anchor, which is Imhotep the Stormlord and a Hexmark Destroyer. I think I guess I'll talk from a macro perspective as far as the changes with Starshatter really quick. I think it was a little strong. I think definitely something needed to change. It's tough because I feel like at the top of the meta right now, you're seeing a lot of armies that are doing well, a lot of MSU, a lot of bodies, a lot of high OC units, and unfortunately, those are armies that Starshatter really struggles against. And so, like in a tournament setting, yes, they have a really high win rate, but it is a little inflated, I feel like, because there's a lot of matchups that Starshatter can just really just destroy, but then at the top of it, there's just a lot that it just cannot handle, or it's just going to be a really uphill battle in those games. So I think with the changes, unfortunately, it makes list design a little bit more linear because I feel like the extra CP for +1 to wound and also for -1 to wound, it really limits obviously how often you can use it and then what units you want to take, where all of a sudden when you wanted to take Ophidian Destroyers and maybe do like an Ingress play with like +1 to wound, that plays now 3 CP instead of 2, and it makes it a lot less attractive, I guess you could say. So, I think Starshatter overall is still going to be very strong, but I think it is, I don't know. It's still just like in a tough spot where like list design I think is just going to be a little bit more linear. So I think Imhotep, you have to take Imhotep because of that reason, with the CP increase and just being able to do stuff. And he's a durable body. I mean, yes, he has 100 points, but it's a great synergy, especially in the meta right now where you're really needing to screen efficiently, and just having those two pieces on the backfield, and the hex mark is just a great piece where you can use them early game for Overwatch threats, and then in the late game for Overwatch threats in your backfield. So then we're going to essentially be building around the Silent King castle. So we have the Silent King, we have a Canoptic Reanimator, we have a Spider, and then we are also running the Scorpec Lord with the Chrono Impedance Field. And originally I was running the Hexmark, which I think is also a really good option. I think it just depends on like how you want to play those pieces. But I think if you are running a Silent King build, the Scorpec Lord I think just synergizes a little bit better with that design. Because if you think about it, the Scorpec Lord and the Hexmark are still more or less hanging around each other the whole game. And sometimes the problem you run into is if they do want to go after the king with a melee army, which is a lot of times are bad matchups, at least the Scorpec Lord gives you a heroic intervene threat, and he's pretty hard to kill. Like he's not easy. He's only 80 points, so he's pretty cheap, and he can do definitely still a lot of damage in this detachment with mortal wounds on the charge. He's strength 10, so a lot of things you're probably going to be able to wound him on 2s with the +1 to wound strat. He's just very efficient for his points. He's very good. Pretty much most of the lists that I write, whether it's like in Awakened or in Starshatter, I have a Scorpec Lord just because they're just so good right now for their points. And then going in the anti-tank section, I am running 2 Doomsday Arcs and a Locust Heavy Destroyer. I think there is you could run 3 Arcs. I think the problem is right now is the unit count. I think is a big issue with Starshatter because, again, with a lot of the armies that are doing well, at least initially, like not having enough board control, it puts you in a bad. I think it just puts you in a bad spot. Now, granted, Doomsday Arcs are really nice because they are big, so it's nice because they can screen your backfield. They're really big, and they can also, obviously shooting downfield and covering range. So they're a solid platform, especially with the king, getting the rerolls, all that good stuff. And then we have 1 Locust Heavy Destroyer, which could be used as mission play or primary denial, but units of 1 on the Heavy Destroyers are actually really nice, just because most of the time if they're dropping in, they're going to be able to hit something on a 2, and then they're wounding it on a 3, and they get to reroll 1s because it's a vehicle. So a lot of times if you need to put some damage on something in a pinch, it's a pretty reliable one-shot. It's only 55 points. And then you can also still use it as like a back screen or like action piece, which is pretty awesome. So, and then let's get into our mission play and mission play. I was going to say mission play and area denial, mission play and primary denial. So again, we're thinking more or less about the meta right now. And again, a lot of stuff we need to slow down. We need to slow down scout moves. We need to slow down world eaters. We need to slow down. There's 2 units of flayed ones. I think you're pretty much going to see in every list. Bumping it up from 1 unit to 2 has felt pretty good. It just gives you more options depending on the matchup and what you need to do. And even if you're not spending the +1 to wound strat for the flayed one, since it's like 2 CP, I still think 2 units of 5 is pretty viable right now, just because their sheer volume of attacks for 60 points, they infiltrate. They just do a lot of things that Starshatter needs done. So 2 units of 5, solid. Tomb Blades, they're great. I personally love them. I think just 1 unit is a perfect sweet spot. Again, 1 CP for flat 6 advance. It's still 1 CP. So getting these guys to potentially move 24 inches in 1 turn is pretty awesome, not going to lie. And still 1 CP to go through walls. So, and they're a 6 OC package. And a lot of times you can position them on the board like out of Overwatch threats. So you can avoid them getting tagged, and then they can just fire fade on objective. They're great for mission play and primary denial turn 1. I think they're fantastic in conjunction with the Triarch Stalker, which you're going to see down here. So a lot of times in the deployment breakdown, I talk about the Tomb Blades and the Triarch Stalker together, is a really nice package for potentially a turn 1 area denial. It's 10 OC. A lot of times they're putting something that's really well, again, it depends on the matchup, but a lot of times I found in my testing, Tomb Blades and Triarch Stalker are able to handle whatever they're putting on that objective turn 1 in most matchups. Of course, you're probably going to lose those resources next turn, especially with the change to the one. What is it? Oh yeah, it's still 1 CP, but it's D6 inches and not flat 6 on the Triarch Stalker, and then you can't do the. You could potentially do the 2 CP -1 to wound on it, but I think that's kind of expensive for the first turn. So I haven't done a ton of testing on this yet, so I don't know really how viable this combo is anymore with the changes, but I think it's still strong. And then of course we still have Scorpec destroyers, even with the changes, I still think they're good. Again, it's like, yes, it went up to 2 CP, but that doesn't mean you can't use it at all. I mean, it's just like you might be able to use it one less time a game and not just hitting the spam button every turn, right? So you got to use it just more selectively. And then we have a unit of 2 Locust heavy destroyers with the Emitic guns. And then we have a unit of 1 Locust heavy destroyer with the Emitic guns. Now, a lot of times in matchups, what I'm going to be doing is taking 1 Locust heavy destroyer with the Emitic and deploying it, and then the other 2 are going to be in reserve. Now, the unit of 1, the reason for that is a lot of times your opponent is putting something in the skirmish game in round 1 and 2, something that's fairly easy to kill, your Jackals, your JPIs, scouts, right? Those like, 3 up, 4 up saves, 5 wounds, 10 wound units. And a lot of times the Silent King's indirect is not enough to kill them by themselves, by himself. And so I feel like a really good synergy that's worked really well in a lot of games, you just have that unit of 1 that goes up. It fires first, gets like most of the unit down because it's 12 shots at 611, rerolling 1s to wound if they're not a vehicle, which is really good. And then you finish off that asset with the Silent King has proved to work very well because it's a total of 24 shots. That's my alarm. Apologize. So let's go into the Ophidian destroyers. So the Ophidian destroyers, I think a unit of 1. I personally like them. I don't think there's any reason to run 2 units of 2 now, just because of the changes to the strat. But I think the Ophidians really do solve some problems that Starshatter is running into when it comes to just board control and scoring secondaries. So there's just a lot of ways that you can use just 1 unit of Ophidians. Yes, you could break them down into 2 Locust destroyers, which I think is still super strong as well. I just like the Ophidians depending on the matchup. They could really cause some damage late in game, where it really just depends on what your opponent has on their backfield. So if they have like Gretchen back there, or Jackals, or just something that's relatively squishy, a lot of times I'll keep the Ophidians in reserve and look for like a late game ingress threat to threaten their home field. They're still very good at that. Or if that's not really an option, let's say I'm playing, perfect example, let's say I'm playing against like Grey Knights, then I'm probably just going to have them on the board. And it allows me just to have like an up-down unit. It's something for extra board control. And it's just 1 unit for 80 points. I think it's just very versatile and allows you kind of like tech your list a little bit on the fly, depending on the matchup. And then the last unit was the unit of heavy destroyers, the unit of 2 Emitics. If you've seen some of my videos in the past, this unit has just not left my list just because it's an extremely efficient package for 110 points. 24 shots, 611. And then you can blip, ignore cover with the Triarch Stalker if it's still alive, but they're just a great resource, especially in the early game, to drop in and threaten your opponent's natural expansion, or the midfield, or if you just need to clear, some trash, right? They're just great at doing that, and just a very efficient unit for their points. Now, a couple things that I see as far as when it comes to Starshatter. If you stuck around this long, seriously appreciate you watching. Going to go over like kind of just a couple more things, just top of mind. The The Amitic package with the Locust Lord is very interesting with Ignore Cover. I still think that that unit is strong. With the changes, that's going to be a tough one because of the fact that I feel like a lot of the reason why that unit was so strong is because you're using the +1 to wound strat for it. So, and the other thing where they got a lot of value is you could drop them in +1 to wound. So pretty much a lot of things in the game they're wounding on 2s, and then you could spend a CP to flat 6 advance them like back behind a wall. So a lot of times, like your opponent, they would commit a resource to try to kill them, and a lot of times they wouldn't kill him because I mean there's still T6, 3-up save, 12 wounds for the unit. There's there are 4 wounds, which is really awkward for a lot of weapon profiles. So there's like a lot of overkill, and so they would a lot of times they'd probably kill 1 or 2 heavy destroyers, and then you just 1 CP flat 6 advance them. But since it's D6 now, and they're a pretty big footprint, I think it changes how effective that package is. But again, I mean I'll have to do some more testing and see. But yeah, I mean, overall, this list it's felt really good, and I think the other viable build is definitely building around the race and the Catacomb Command Barge, which looks a little bit different. But I think these are more or less kind of the 2 foundations you're going to see is really building around the Silent King durability, and then filling it up with Doomsday Arcs, and then the rest is trash. I think is a good way to do it. And then also just running 2 arcs, it kind of helps you in terms of like if they do eventually increase the points on arcs, which they probably are going to, at least like 10 points, you're not as affected by it. But other than that, yeah, this is updated Starshatter list. So if you're going to a tournament this weekend, or you're practicing with your friends, a couple of your buddies, maybe try this out now that you know kind of why it's designed the way it is, and let me know how it goes. But yeah, appreciate you watching. And until the next one, I'm going to link 2 videos up top. Okay.